Welcome to the Tenant Screening Podcast, a training course for landlords to understand how to effectively find great renters. Sponsored by VeteranLandlord.com. And now your host, Edward O'Daniel.
Hey landlords, welcome to the Tenant Screening Podcast. I'm your host, Edward O'Daniel, and I'm totally pumped to be here with you today. I'm excited to get this podcast series started, get this training out there so it can help a bunch of you landlords with your tenant screening, picking out good tenants, and setting up your policies and procedures on how you do that. Before we get started here, I want to give you just a little update about myself. My name is Edward O'Daniel. I'm in the St. Louis, Missouri area, and I own and run St. Louis Property Management. Been doing landlording since 2005 with my own properties as well as the properties of others from our investors. And one of the main things that I struggled with, I know when I first started, was how to pick good tenants. I mean, I literally, and I can remember when I first got started on my very first one, I had people fill out an application and I didn't even know what to look for. Just like, okay, it looks like you can afford this and looks like you made enough money. I mean, I had zero policies, zero procedures. I had nothing when I first got started, which is why I struggled so much, because my first couple of tenants really weren't the best. Let's just say that. So over the years and years that I've been doing this, I've developed more and more strategies, being able to pick out good tenants, which ones to stay away from, which ones that I would want to lean toward. And I'm just excited to bring that to you here. So that's one of the main reasons why I really wanted to create this podcast, is just kind of get that out there, because I don't want other people to start doing landlording and run across the same problems I have. Because at the time when I started back in 2005, podcasts really weren't around very much. The training to get online were not there to easily be accessible for tenant screening and to find out how to pick good tenants. You just couldn't find any resources. So just over the years of going to boot camps and going to trainings, listening to different events and things like that, you slowly began building up good, better, until you get to the really good screening procedures where you can pick out people and weed people out who are not going to be good. One of the main things I want to make sure on this episode also that I can get across to people is who should be using this podcast. And what I mean by that is whether or not you're going to be doing your own tenant screening or whether or not you're going to hire that out to a third party. So that's one of the conversations I at least want if you're listening to this podcast to sit back and think about is, should you screen your own tenants or should you have a tenant screening company do that for you? It's kind of pros and cons both ways. I've met people that want to do their own screening. If you do that and you go down that path, there are some resources that I'll talk about here shortly that you're going to need. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have the time and the resources and go through all of the work to screen your own tenants, then I would just simply say, go to Google and just search tenant screening company in your city. And that should give you people who are ready to screen tenants where you don't have to do anything. For the most part, tenant screening companies that are third parties, they provide their own online application access. So all you need to do is just send that link to an applicant, or put that link in your marketing that says apply here, and send them over to a third party. The third party will gather the data, do all the work. They will take all the payment for it. And then basically in a couple of days, typically 48 to 72 hours, the tenant screening company will send a report over to you on whether or not their idea of whether you should accept or deny people based upon their standards. So, and one of the main things is if they're doing it based upon their standards, then a lot of the things are off your plate. What I mean by that is, biggest thing that I have to warn new landlords about is fair housing. You have to be consistent and screen every tenant the same, because if you don't, there could be a case for discrimination. So if you're using a third party to screen your applications, then all of that discrimination, that fair housing, is on them, because they're the ones that screen the applicant. They're the ones who have that responsibility. But also, if they're a screening company, then you could pretty much bet they're going to have standard qualifications that they treat everybody the same by. Okay. Now, that right there, if you're a beginning landlord, I'm personally going to have to recommend that you use that approach. It's the fastest, it's the easiest to get up, and you can utilize their expertise while you listen to the rest of this podcast and maybe build your own expertise, work with a tenant screening company, and then maybe you could start screening your tenants later once you've been through a few rounds of looking at applications and seeing the reports and things like that get generated. Now, if you're going to be doing this yourself, I will let you know that there are, when I talked about resources earlier, you will need to have some resources available for you. Number one, you will need to be able to have an application, a rental application that you can utilize. Now, if you take a look here, I'm also the founder of Veteran Landlord. You'll see the little logo up in here, but I'm also the founder of Veteran Landlord, and Veteran Landlord is there really just as a repository of information to help make you guys more successful. It's a free site. Go log in, create your free account. All the information that you're going to need and the resources you're going to need, a part of this is going to be located on the Veteran Landlord inside of the document library area. So, but just sort of back to it, rental application is one of the things you're going to need. You can go to the Veteran Landlord site and get that. You're also going to need a tenant screening company. Like a screening background company to pick from. Now, I would have you guys go find out that yourself. I don't recommend anybody. I don't have any sponsors on this podcast that I can give you. I'm sorry. But right now, just if you're looking for it, just do background screening or tenant screening companies. And these are people that you can submit the application to. You can generate your own report. Typically, it does cost you, I think, on average about $20 per report to pull those out. And then it's up to you to look at the report, look at the credit, look at everything else, and then to determine what you need to do. So that's one of the resources that you're going to need. You're also going to need to make sure that that same company can do all the background checks that you're looking for. So not only a credit check, but you're also looking for just overall a background check. You're looking for National Eviction Database. You're looking for the Sex Offender Registry. You're looking for the criminal background, so they can generate any felonies, misdemeanors, any kind of, if they've ever been arrested, generate a criminal background report as well. Even the terrorist watch list is on there. So all of this stuff needs to be kind of included in your report because, well, you don't want to miss something. You don't want to put somebody in there that if part of your qualifications is that you don't put sex offenders into your properties, that's up to you. But if you miss that, if you don't have that information, then you can't make a decision based upon it. So you need to get all of those reports and make sure that the company that you use can generate those for you. But typically, the more of those you get, the more expensive it gets. General background is about $20. It can go up to maybe $30, $35 if you run all of those reports to get all of them. So going back to that, you need to make sure that whenever you take applications, you need to charge them an application fee. Okay, people are used to an application fee. I know some new landlords are for it. Some people are against it. I would have to say, please apply an application fee. That's going to be your very first barrier. If you get an applicant that does not want to pay an application fee, then you're most likely not going to want to use that person, because everybody that's applying for an apartment, a home, whatever it is going to understand that there's going to be an application fee involved. Okay, so just make sure the application fee is enough to cover all of your expenses that you're going to utilize. And if you're doing this yourself, to even cover a little bit of time for yourself to run and process the application. So we're going to be covering a lot of information here. One of the main resources I've created for this task is called the Tenant Screening Handbook. It's not very large. It's about 30, 35 pages, somewhere in there on the ebook. That ebook is available on the Veteran Landlord as well. It has a lot more pictures involved with it of different reports. So I would definitely have to highly recommend that you guys log in and download that. But I'm going to be using that as a basis for the podcast moving forward when we start talking about different areas. For each episode, we're going to be covering different areas of the ebook and kind of going over that so that you guys can build your own standards, your own qualifications, your own processes and procedures. Not only that, when you get the report back, what to look for, because that was the thing that was really embarrassing for me when I first got started. Was here I am, I bought a property, spent, my first property was around 150,000. In my market, it was a mid-type home, but it's $150,000. I mean, we put a big chunk of money down on it. There's a lot of money rolling on this, and I just didn't have the skills for it, and I was a bit nervous for it. So luckily enough, it all worked out, but I don't want any of you guys to take that risk when you don't need to. Utilize this podcast, utilize a veteran landlord as a resource to help you get better and be successful with this. So guys, I want to thank you so much for hopping on this episode. This was just real quick, short to kind of let you know whether or not this podcast is going to be beneficial to you or not. If you are looking to use a third-party tenant screening company, then you probably aren't going to get a lot of use about this one unless you just want to learn how to do it yourself. But just thanks so much. I appreciate you listening, and listen to the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Tenant Screening Podcast. To get your free copy of the Tenant Screening Handbook, visit us at veteranlandlord.com and create your free account. If you find this material valuable, we'd appreciate it if you can share this podcast with others and leave us a great review.